Holla ballers! What's going on? It's Preacher and welcome to that discussion over Mythic Gul'dan. We're going to do it a little differently. I'm going to do it workshop style. As you can see, we've got our live chat, but nobody's there because I'm locally recording. But this fight is very cool. It's easily the best fight that's been put into Legion, which comes as a surprise because the end of Nighthole, particularly Starbro and Elsand, not so fun. Debatable. Some people quite like them. I don't see it. But I wanted to talk about Gul'dan as why I like it, and also why I want Blizzard to kind of push this in this direction and look at doing more fights like this, although we understand these are really difficult to do. And also a little bit of mage stuff, so you guys can see it from my point of view, because I do get to tank in this fight. I get to do some extra things other than just be like a DPSer. And also, for every raider out there, how we can use boss mechanics to our advantage and use them to generate more DPS. Now, the interesting thing about Gul'dan is it's the only fight in the Nighthold so far that I believe everything else, besides maybe Scorpion or Chromatic Anomaly, the early bosses, that hasn't been directly nerfed. Particularly considering the struggle that a lot of Mythic guilds are having, even now after the new AP stuff, in getting these last three down. We know that the earlier bosses, the middle bosses kind of got changed, but the later bosses definitely, Starbro's been changed, Elsand got some changes. But Mythic Gul'dan was remained untouched, and only the AP changes made a difference. Now, you're going to say to me, that's a nerf. Yeah, for Phase 2 and 3, definitely. But Phase 1 is really interesting, and that's why I want to show you that as well, is that Phase 1 has a really cool design, which is based on how your raid is going to deal with it. Again, something we've not really seen in Legion, and I particularly hate bosses that are so predetermined by Blizzard as to this is what you must do, and you must hit all these checkpoints, tick, 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 in order to defeat this encounter. I much prefer encounters where a series of challenges are presented, and depending on your raid composition, how your guys play, do you have stronger DPS, stronger tanking, stronger healing, and modifying how fights are done. Mythic Gul'dan is so good in that respect that, in fact, you'll still see debate to this day as to when do we use Bloodlust. Something that is ordinarily, like, consigned way before. A lot of people will approach a new encounter and go, when do we Bloodlust here, right? A question many of you have asked or heard asked before. But in this one, it's actually up for debate. Depends on how you want to deal with the encounter, which is wonderful. That's great. That's something that a raid can discuss and find a problem and then work out a solution based on how we want to do things. So in terms of Phase 1, we're going to be using Bloodlust twice in this fight. We're going to use it in Phase 1. We're going to use it in Phase 2, Phase 3, or Phase 4, as I believe it's technically called. Some people like to use it in Phase 3. Some people like to use it in Phase 2, depending on, how you want to do it. Now, the cool thing as to why I say the nerfs are more Phase 2 and the final phase with Illidan is because Phase 1 is designed so well that, in fact, this Phase 1 could go on for a really long time and not be that much more difficult. Because everything that Gul'dan's going to do in Phase 1 has room for error. This is something that has been missing, particularly on Starbro and Elsand, is room for error, where if a player makes a tiny mistake, it's generally a wipe. That happens quite often. But in this one, in fact, you can make a lot of little mistakes and people can have this little brain fart, which is great in a fight that lasts like 10 plus minutes, up to 15 minutes. And still be saved and worked around. And RNG is not going to play a huge factor in this. In fact, we can counter any form of RNG, particularly with the bonds that we'll see in the fight, by using healers in a different way and changing our strategy and hoping to do things. Another thing about Phase 1, which is really cool, is despite our DPS increasing, what this actually creates because of Phase 1's design is new challenges, as you start to hit different check marks. And what you'll find when you guys get to this, and I hope you guys get to this, is you'll be adjusting things every pull. Every single pull. You'll be adjusting things. How many bubbles do we use? Do we want DPS to sort this? Do we want healers to deal with this? All that kind of stuff. So, let's jump over into the actual fight. I'm just going to be using this video of our first kill. You're obviously going to be seeing my Frostmage point of view. Now, one thing to note here is we're sacrificing deeps. Sorry, I know, the holy sin. We're sacrificing deeps. One, we don't particularly need super deeps, and in the first phase as a mage, I'm going to be doing a lot of soaking. So I'm going to be using my Belivir's legendary chest. I'm going to sacrifice some DPS to pull out my Belivir's. I could have had 4 Bloodlusts in this fight. Maybe 5. Maybe 5, but in fact, I'm going to be using the standard 2 Bloodlusts and using my Belivir's. So rip the dream, but that's okay. That's all good. And we're going to kick off with some magey shenanigans straight off the bat. So we notice, first of all, look how I'm positioned. I'm positioned in a very, very different way than everyone else. Everyone else is going to be positioned around this green marker. I'm going to set myself back a little bit. And that's because when we do pull in a moment, Gul'dan's going to knock everybody back, right? So what I can do is abuse that as a mage. And every single time you guys enter an encounter like this, I want you to look for ways you can abuse your mage or abuse your class in some way. So what I'm going to do is actually shatter my Eben Bolt, my opener, get knocked back, blink through the knockback, and then shatter my Ice Lance. So you can see I'm going to bop, back, knock back, blink, and then Ice Lance. Give me that huge pull that you can see at the bottom on the DPS there. Now, when it comes to this bit, this is a pretty standard opener, which is the whole raid grouped using a Spirit Link in order to break all the first bonds and then spreading out, because we're going to get Hand of Gul'dan. That's going to spawn the Jailer. And we're hoping to bait Liquid Fire out of the raid. That's what the range they're going to spread out. You can see they're all spread in a sort of semicircle. Bait the Liquid Fire, the Liquid Hellfire out of the raid. And then we're going to move back in for bonds. And you're going to see this sort of collapsing and spreading out motion quite a lot. You can see I'm moving out here trying to do things. Now, one thing to know here, which people are probably like scratching their heads at, is I do not use time dilation at this point. The reason for that is the way Frostmage works, it can be a little random. As some people are probably aware, Frostmage can be a little random. And time dilation tends to munch your Icy Veins, my particular DPS cooldown. If I have bad procs, it tends to munch it up. So what I actually do is I use time dilation a little later in the fight to get the most benefit out of it. I found that gave me by far the better consistent DPS. And that's the important thing here. Consistent higher DPS was to use it much, much later. So that's why I'm doing that. You'll notice a little thing there. You can see that I actually use, this is something I found out very early on, my Frozen Orb. So we have the trait that gives us instant blizzard. So a big problem Frost Mages, and I see it all the time, particularly in LFR and things like that, I see this all the time, is people casting Frozen Orb when ads spawn. Now, the problem is, your Frozen Orb, if an eye was to spawn here, my Frozen Orb could actually hit it here and miss out on damage. Terrible thing to do. So what you'll see regularly is me sliding Frozen Orb into Gul'dan just before the eyes spawn, just to make sure it AoEs everything, and then waiting just a second to see where the eyes go to get the proper Blizzard. What you'll tend to see other people do is maybe Frozen Orb, and I've casted Frozen Orb, it might hit an eye, and then casting Blizzard in a very set place. But the eyes can spawn kind of randomly, and you want to make sure you're hitting as many as possible. So that's a slight tweak to what we're going to do, which is just cast the Frozen Orb into Gul'dan himself. That should hit all the eyes, and then Blizzard a second or so later to make sure our Blizzard's hitting everything. You can see my Blizzard's hitting absolutely everything now. And then try sliding in an extra Blizzard along the way. So an interesting moment here is, again, this is a DPS checkpoint. I really like this. So our aim here is to kill the eyes just before bonds finish. Now you can see it's 1 second before as one eye finish. These are the DPS checkpoints I'm talking about. This one is what every guild will want to do, because we all want to be gathered in this spot for bonds and then getting knocked back into the same place. This is really important. Why is this important? Because we're going to be hitting a later DPS checkpoint that's going to be really important. This DPS checkpoint is going to allow us to transition into the next phase really smoothly. Excuse me. So what we're trying to do is transition Gul'dan before a particular set of eyes and before a particular set of bonds. And that's causing huge raid adjustment. We want to gather here because we're going to use a healer bubble, which is only usable once on Mythic Gul'dan per healer, to make sure that DPS never have to soak the bonds. That's going to, in turn, turn our DPS on the boss up and allow us to hit this later checkpoint. So all of this is working together to hit this much later DPS checkpoint that has actually been determined ourselves. This isn't something that the fight has determined. It's just where our raid DPS has left us to make sure we can do things like this. So again, we're moving out. We're baiting Liquid Hellfire. You've surely seen this on every video. Here comes the Hellfire. And now you can see we've moved into what we call the big boy bait positions. This is where the Liquid Hellfires start to stick around. The empowered Hellfires stick around forever. So you can see, I take position here with our Warlock. You can see this portal set up for this. And you can see the other group of ranged here. And we did this again to increase DPS. Once again, the reason for that is to hit this later checkpoint. What we want to do is move as little as possible. So if we split our raid here, usually we have another player here, but unfortunately he couldn't make the raid. Usually we have 2 Warlocks and me, and the rest of the ranged over here. It's going to hit one of us. That means one group doesn't have to move. consistently increasing DPS overall, rather than all being in one bunch and lowering DPS, because definitely everybody has to move. So it lands on us. Only 2 people have to move here, and the rest of the raid continues to do something. A little mage thing there, you'll notice I blinked and moved back. That's to get my Beliviers activated, yeah? I want that shield so I don't take absurd amounts of damage. This time they moved, I got to do consistent DPS. And again, a mage thing here. As soon as I see the fire, I'm going to blink out of it so I'm at range from it. I get my Belivier shield, and then I get to go on. So we've got Hands of Gul'dan. You can see 0.5 seconds left, firing the Frozen Orb in. Exactly what I talked about earlier on. Now, this is a really dangerous one, because what you can see happening here is Eyes and Bonds of Fel are going to be at the same time. That means we're going to have to be stacked in order to meet that quota of DPS never having to break bonds. So we want everybody knocked in one place, so they all go in one bubble. But Eyes of Gul'dan at the same time. So we're actually moving into an area. You can see everybody gathering here, where we're going to get AoE'd. So everybody saves something. So I'm going to have a blink ready. You can see I actually walk into the pack here rather than blink into it, in order to get the fuck out as fast as possible. And everyone's going to use whatever they've got. So whether it be a Warlock teleport, some other form of blink, a jump, whatever it's going to be to get the hell out of this about to be Warzone. So here comes the Eyes of Gul'dan. Here come the bonds. We all run in very quickly. I take position so I may wing, and then boom, I'm out of there as soon as humanly possible. Minimal damage. And you can see the raid itself all doing the same kind of thing, so they take very little damage. Going back to the sort of thing. Straight back to baiting Liquid Hellfire. Now, as soon as this Liquid Hellfire is done, this is when I'm going to use my time dilation. Now, as we progressed on this fight, traditionally, I was using the second Icy Veins here. You can see my Icy Veins is back off cooldown. Now, I stopped doing this because we could just make it without that. I used time dilation because I'm not going to be able to use that in the next phase, but I'm actually going to save cooldowns here. Now, what we're trying to do, you can see Bonds is in 8. We need to transition in 2.5%, 52.5%. So at 50%, he's going to transition. We're trying to hit that marker before he casts Bonds, ideally, but definitely before he casts Eyes. Now, I believe this is the one way we do it. And all these little adjustments that we did earlier on in Phase 1 are what going to allow us, with our current raid DPS, to do this. See, but there we go. We got it before Bonds, into Stage 3. No stress, no pressure as we transition over. Now, your guild might not be able to do that. Is that a problem? Does that mean that the strategy is to defeat this by that point? No. Absolutely not. This is the great thing about Mythic Gul'dan. The actual thing that's going on here, which is truly important, is that if you can't make that, it's fine. You can move the boss around the room and then continue the phase as normal. The reason that's such a tight check for us is we've created this wall of Liquid Hellfire, which is relatively close to the boss. We're all grouped up. So if we get the Eyes, it's very difficult to deal with because we're going to have Bonds that knock us back and create another wall behind us. Then we've got Liquid Hellfire making another wall, so we're very, very constricted in space. Makes the Eyes very difficult to deal with. Now, if we know for a fact we can't do this transition, we just don't do Phase 1 that way. And that's a really wonderful design, because other people who are watching this might not do Phase 1 that way. They might not Bloodlust in Phase 1. They have a longer Phase 1. Is that difficult to deal with if you know you're going to have to deal with this mechanic? It's really not. You move the boss around, you create more room, you don't constrict the space, and you continue as normal, and you transition the boss whenever you feel like. This is the cool thing, is that as we progress through it, we found new checkpoints to meet that aren't predetermined by Blizzard. I absolutely love this. So I'm going to do a little thing here, which is I'm going to go straight to Phase 2. I'm going to pop Icy Veins as we transition and as we get Storm. And this is for really cool reasons. One, I'm going to need Icy Veins at a very particular moment coming up later. And also, while I'm getting blown, I can't really cast spells really well. I can do pretty good as a mage because I can blink and keep casting. But I'm also going to use my Frozen Orb, which provides me with instant cast spells. I saved my Frozen Orb for this point, hopefully to proc a lot of instant casts so I can actually get my job done. So as we move through, going to cast my Frozen Orb there. Little wonky on the Frozen Orb, unfortunately, but there you go. Those are those instant cast spells that I was hoping for while we were getting moved, so I could continue doing decent DPS, even though this usually DPS stopping mechanic is going on. Now, this part's a little wonky. Again, as a mage, you're pretty squishy. It's something that most mages realize once you hit, like, Elisand and stuff. And we have Flames of Sergras coming on. I'm going to save it so I can blink back in. You can see I formed my little flames here. All we're doing here, actually, and there's only one rule we had for people here, is make a pathway here. So melee can use right near the font, and then we can use all this back area, but leave a road. make a road. Anything here, it doesn't matter at all. We're not that bothered about it. But what I'm trying to do is actually save stuff for the Black Harvest. I could have definitely done more DPS there by blinking back in. I had 2 blinks ready and gone a little bit further with that. But I'm very wary of Black Harvest. Like, if I get Flames and Black Harvest, I can be in a tricky situation. You can see how low my health dips there. I've always got a blink at the ready if I get really low. I've got a health potion ready. I've got my ice barrier ready. But generally, I'm just going to be saving those things for like, oh shit, I might die here. So here comes our first storm. Very simple mechanic here, raid-wise, is that we push everyone to the ledge here, and then we had one rule, because Flames comes in immediately after Storm when you're all gathered up. Now, if you don't know, Flames actually doubles if it hits somebody else. So if you have Flames and it AoEs to drop the Flame Patch, if it hits anyone else, they drop a Flame Patch too. So it can get massively out of hand very quickly. So the very simple rule we came up with is, if you get Flames in a moment, you stay here, and you stay to this ledge. Everyone else runs away. The guys with flames stay really still. Now, of course, I've got blink, so I can just get the fuck out of there. But you can see these guys all got flames. You can see they're all dropping them to the ridge. The whole raid moves with Gul'dan to the middle, while everyone else moves off to the sides there. Doesn't matter if these guys double, because they already have it, which makes it super easy. So at this point, another thing for Frost Mages here is I actually save my Frozen Orb again for this Eye and Gul'dan. Obviously, we want Frozen Orbs to hit as many targets as possible, right? And that's going to go a little wonky later on. Spoilers. But this time, I'm going to drop my Frozen Orb into Gul'dan, so it hits both. Double Iceland's Cleave. All good shit. Help nuke that down as fast as possible. I want to note here, a lot of the decisions I'm making won't give you the best DPS. Absolutely not. But in progress, I'm never going to be the guy. I always tell you guys, don't be the guy who's too arsed about your DPS unless you're hitting a DPS checkmark. Make sure you're dealing with the mechanics that are dangerous. Everything else can sort itself out afterwards. So what is the dangerous mechanics in this fight? Eyes, especially. So I'm going to be saving things for eyes to get them out of the fight as quickly as possible. This is a knock-on effect. If you deal with the hard mechanics super fast and don't overly worry about ranks or stupid shit like that, what tends to happen is this knock-on effect around the whole raid. You might have an eye lasting a long time because other people didn't save their cooldowns properly. Like, I'm doing the best DPS I can here with Frozen Orbs and Iceland's Cleaves, right? But other people who can't do that, like Melee, who've had to switch off to Gul'dan, they don't really want to blow cooldowns on an Eye of Gul'dan. They want to come back to Gul'dan and use their DPS. So the best that I do on that, on the Eye, and kill that quicker, means all those guys can come back to Gul'dan and kill the boss quicker. And you can see how it circles round. It's trying not to be selfish with how we play the fight, is how I would put it. We're trying not to be selfish here. Well, at the cost of our own damage. Our damage isn't bad by any means. We're still at 1 million DPS, but we're generally trying to use stuff in a way that, one, plays to our strengths as a class. And that's what it's all about. How can I play to my strengths as a Frost Mage here? I want to Iceland's Cleave 2 targets, so if I can make that stronger, I will, and that usually helps other guys who are more single target orientated to put more damage into the boss and help us work through it quicker. So again, Flames of Cerberus, I noticed that my priest friend gets it, so I blink off to the right as far as I can. I'm going to tuck these in nice and strong in here, and then move over to this side. Now, this was a little tricky, because I got that Flames then, it lost me a lot of, it caused me to have a different proc cycle than what I was used to. Traditionally, we're going to deal with 2 Eyes of Gul'dan now. Now, based on what I just said, my strengths of a Frost Mage are a lot of burst on demand, particularly with my spell Ebenbolt and my Frozen Orb, right? So what traditionally would happen here, and didn't happen with this it happens like 1 out of 50 pulls, is I don't have an Ebenbolt for this Eye that's coming up, which is really quite annoying to me. So you can see we position everybody here. I love this. We get everybody here because what's going to happen here is we're going to make sure Gul'dan teleports to this side of the room, but his eye, he's already casting it. You see the cast bar here? He's going to cast his eye at the back of the room. So we're going to portal everybody through the storm to the other side, deal with this one eye, and get back here as quickly as possible. That includes the melee. So based on what I just told you, I don't want the melee dealing with this eye for any length of time. So I'm going to make a decision here which isn't the best and not what I would have liked to have done, but in this pull I had to adjust a little bit. Usually I have an Ebenbolt for this, so I teleport through. I blink immediately because everybody's coming through here. He's also casting Flames of Cerberus, right? People are going to start blowing up. So I come through the portal, I blink instantly to space, target the eye. Gul'dan's going to teleport in a moment. Now, usually I would Ebenbolt this eye and shatter it and try and kill it as fast as possible. don't have even bolt. Really pissed off about this. I can remember playing this moment and being like, fuck's sake. You know what I mean? Because we're on progress and stuff, and I should be making sure that happens. So to try and pick up the slack a little bit, I'm going to cast a Frozen Orb, which is a bit of a waste, but it will give me that extra burst. There's the Frozen Orb going now. Just to give me that extra little bit. You can see, look how bad this is. Fucking garbage. But still, trying my best just to try and help get this eye down as fast as possible. Typically, I would have aggro on this eye, and that's no joke. I would have aggro on this eye. Now, we're going to do something cool. So he's going to spawn his second Eye of Gul'dan, which is the one that's Gul'dan and the eye. That's where I'd use that Frozen Orb, right? Same as we did before. Fucking pisser, right? But there you go. But I do have my Even Bolt coming back, so, I mean, it works out a different way. I'm going to shatter my Even Bolt into the eye. You can see it chunks the health when it happens. Now, the flames here is kind of interesting because we're going to use the boss to actually help our DPS here. I'm going to drop them here, and what we're going to see is Gul'dan pulled. This is really cool. I love this. Is we pull Gul'dan over here, and he's going to do the Storm. Now, he's instantly going to do Black Harvest after the Storm, which is the big AoE that murders everybody. So we're going to use the Storm to push the whole raid down this road to the exact position we want to be. So you can see everybody's running up to this. So this was never talked about. This is just raiders realizing what they can do. So we can cast as we're going. Usually I would like that. I would actually have another Frozen Orb traveling there so I can Ice Lance him all the way. And you can see the way that Storm pushed us all into the green. So we're all in the right position where we want to be. Besides the tank here, because obviously we don't want to cleave the raid. If you're not sure, Gul'dan's cleave has infinite range. So if you stood anywhere near the tank on this fight, you go and die. This is why we saved Icy Veins. So I've had Icy Veins sitting around for a long time. This is another one of those moments where you're holding back on a DPS cooldown, which you probably won't do on farm, just for this moment. We're going to save cooldowns. You can see I'm coming into this with Icy Veins. Frozen Orb is ready, and my Even Bolt's about to come back. Because all we're trying to do here is kill Gul'dan before Illidan becomes active. That's it. So this becomes a DPS race now, and this is why using all those little tricks and stuff we did earlier, killing eyes as fast as possible to give other people more time on Gul'dan, all comes together for this one moment. If we don't do all of those tiny little things throughout the fight, then Gul'dan's likely to have slightly higher health, which can make it a little bit more difficult. And all these things kind of come together for this one checkpoint that we've set ourselves. I want to again be clear here. If we couldn't do this now, it's not a problem. The next mechanic is fully dealable with. It's hard, it's 2 eyes at once, but it's not the end of the world, and it's certainly something that we can and did deal with as we did start learning this fight before the AP changes. So we're going to come in here. I am absolutely, at this point, again, not bothered what my damage is, because I'm about to go and do something which is going to kill my damage anyway. So this is where I kind of sign off as being like just a DPSer. So I'm going to be going tanking now. So I'm going to reposition myself to the best place for tanking. It's on the other side of the room. Setting myself up here at blue. And I'm going to do something now, which is something I teach regularly when I'm doing guides and stuff. Be a volunteer. It's a video I did during Wars of Draenor. Be a volunteer. Be the guy who deals with something else. Even if it's not difficult. Because what we're going to do is not difficult at all. But what we're going to do is try and do more with it than the minimum. And the reason we do that is similar to other things we've talked about in this video. I want, in this scenario, if I have a special job to do, I want that burden to be on me as much as humanly possible. And the reason for that is I don't want anyone else in this raid caring about this mechanic. That's why. I want the whole rest of the raid to deal with their shit. And one reason I really like this fight is during this fight, we're going to have a number of things going on that involve all different types of the raids. We're going to have tanks dealing with Soul Sever. We're going to have 2 characters also dealing with Soul Sever. Usually the rogues are going to be dealing with that. We're going to have the melee coordinating stuns on parasites. We're going to have the melee killing the parasites in a set amount of time, so they are not a problem. We're also going to have the ranged DPS dealing with the Doomguard ads. None of these mechanics are difficult at all. But they all have to work together. They're all little cogs in the machine that are going to allow this fight to be killed, right? And I love that type of stuff where everybody's doing different things. And Kael'thas was one of the first bosses that really highlighted that. Is everybody's doing really different things. Nothing particularly difficult, but when it all comes together, there's a great sense of accomplishment because you all did your job, you all did your job. So what we're going to do here is try and solo this whole mechanic as much as possible. I'm the only mage. So there's no backup if I get this wrong. There's no backup if I get this wrong. So we're going to start doing a little bit of DPS. I know it's the demon with him. I'm going to call it Illidan for the sake of memes. And now I'm just going to start saving cooldowns in a very particular way to do what I just talked about, which is trying to mechanically make my job something that nobody else has to worry about. So what is my job here? Well, you can see he's got Manifest Azzinoth here now. This is going to spawn the Doom Guard. And in a moment, you can see Bulwark of Azzinoth is on the cooldown meter. He's going to spawn a shield. I'm going to spell steal the shield, and I'm going to tank the Night Orbs. Now, tanking's not really the word for it. I have so much threat that if I tickled the nuts of this thing, it would hold aggro on me. But what I want to do is, beyond the guys who gain DPS from just having spells hit it, so we're talking like Warlock sticking an Agony on it for extra shards and all that, I don't want the rest of the raid to give a fuck about the Night Orb mechanic as best as I could possibly do. I don't want to be screaming and shouting about Night Orbs as much as possible. Occasionally we're going to have to do that, but most of all, I want to just be dealing with this and these guys not to care about it. So I'm going to be trying to nuke this Night Orb down in time. And that'll be a spell that comes on a timer called Visions, and that's it. I want them to deal with this. I don't want them to ever worry about it. You can see the new ad spawn, so I spell stole the Night Orb, got it on me. I'm quite happy with where that Night Orb is. Second Night Orb is spawned. I'm dealing with that. So the timer we're trying to hit is this: Visions of the Dark Titan. I want this Night Orb to die then. So around now, I'm going to say, okay, if the ads are dead, which is not quite yet, when everything's happy, go ahead, help me kill the Night Orb. That's all I want. So you can see I switch back to it here. Visions is about to come in. It's on 4%. So I'm pretty happy with how I dealt with that. You'll also notice I'm moving around the back because I'm still getting AoE'd by Night Orb 2. My whole raid is going to run into this thing and then change its color to help with them. Then they're going to run into this bubble that I've created. I'm going to run around the back so I don't splash on them. Okay, so you can see I move around the back. The whole raid goes into that side. Nice and easy. And Visions of the Dark Titan's over. We come out of here, and then we're going to deal with everything else and move back here. Now, Night Orb 2, for the mages who are interested, Night Orb 2 is generally a waste of time. I'm not going to do too much damage on it. You can see I'm actually switching damage to other characters. I'm just going to reposition myself. Why am I doing this? Well, as you can probably, let me see in a better frame. Okay, so you can see I've moved around to here. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. One, orange is where the third and most dangerous Night Orb is going to spawn. But you can see we're starting to shift everything over to this side of the room. This means that if I stand around here and don't bother moving, because I don't have to, I have range on everything, I'm going to be AoEing this area. That's not helpful if I want help on the Night Orbs or to give the range enough room to spread for those large green circles that are coming in. So I'm going to move into this twatty little position where nobody wants to stand ever, and that frees up all this space for the rest of the raid to reposition themselves and have increased DPS. Again, we're thinking about our bros. We want them to have better DPS. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to spell steal the shield to make sure they can DPS nicely. Again, trying to be as quiet as possible. At this point, I'd be saying something like, kill Night Orb 2 if and when you want. I'm going to leave this here for other people to DPS. I'm not going to focus on it too much and try and do other things. I'm going to DPS it because I do more damage than anyone else to it. But as long as it dies in I want this to die before Night Orb 3. And that means we can go full focus on Night Orb 3, which is the most difficult part of the fight. So, here we go. Night Orb 3 is in 6 seconds. Cool. I'm going to instantly be switching. Now, you'll notice I've saved Icy Veins for this. I've saved Demon Bolt for this. So, this is the big transferal point of the fight. This is actually the last difficult part of the fight that you'll encounter if you're going to kill Gul'dan in any sense, right? So, what's going to happen is we're going to have Parasites for the melee to deal with. We're also going to have a Manifest Azzinoth. You can see it coming in here. We have Parasitic Wounds. We have Manifest Azzinoth. And we have Night Orb 3. And then very shortly after that, in 44 seconds, is going to be Visions of the Dark Titan. So, we have to kill everything, including the Night Orb, in the next 44 seconds, or it's a wipe. So, this becomes a very, very sort of charged part of the fight, where everybody has to know their jobs and do their bits individually. So, I'm going to switch over to this. You can see Icy Veins instantly popped. Straight into fucking chunneling into this thing. Trying to nuke it down as fast as possible. Here comes Manifest. Now, I have to remember here, very easy to forget if you get panicked in raids. A lot of people get panicked in raids. Is I still have to spell steal this ad. So I can't just go balls to the wall and ignore this. You can see I position my camera so I can see what's going on here. I can see the cast bars nice. And I can select it wherever I want. There goes the Bulwark. Got to select it. Steal the Bulwark. They're dealing with the Parasites as fast as possible. You can see the tanks are helping with that. They're chunneling down this ad. It's dying real fucking quick. I'm tanking, getting a little low. Nobody's dead yet. Now, we're going to be a little delayed. Excuse me. We're going to be a little delayed here. This is where I make the decision pretty much to... You have to make a decision sometimes when you're raiding. Okay? You have to make this decision sometimes when you're raiding. My death is okay. Now, this is going to be one of those moments. I do more damage than anyone else to the Night Orb, right? And I need the Night Orb to die so the rest of the raid doesn't die. Now, it's going to get very, very close to the wire. Very close to the wire. And in fact, after this, I'm going to be all kerfuffled, and I'll explain why when we get there. So it's going to be super, super close in order to get this job done, to the point that it's going to kill me. I'm not going to move into the... I need to stay outside of the Night Orb's range in order to nuke it down properly. So I'm going to miss the time stop by about 0.2 seconds. That's what's going to happen. But it does get us the kill. So in many ways, I think it was worth to make sure I was channeling as much as possible. And if you do run into a situation where you're like, I'm going to die here, it's okay. So you see time stop spawns there. The guys are already stood there waiting. Most of them will have been silenced. I move in, but look how close I was. I was so fucking close. But still, such is life. Such is life. Now that's okay. Now I'm going to be a little bit disorientated here. One, this is the first time we have ever made it to this phase. Ever. And people are going to get panicked. It happens. People are going to get panicked. Again, I'm not asked about my DPS. So I'm going to make a couple of calls here. One, I do not have the shield anymore. There is a Night Orb up. It's dying super, super fast now. I'm going to ask our tank to gain aggro on it so it doesn't start AoEing healers while I try and nuke it down. And after that, I'm going to try and make myself as useful as possible while these guys just nuke the boss. That's what I want everybody to do. I want them to nuke the boss. I get rezzed in the green thing, which really fucking sucks. I go straight for the Night Orb to try and do something to it. I get stunned by a parasite. I'm nearly dead. The parasites are being dealt with. Everyone's in kind of a panic mode here. You can see our tank there, Mr. Shade, hits the Night Orb to try and get that aggro. And then realizes he can't do much else to it, so he goes off to get Flame Crash. I then managed to finish off the Night Orb. And then watching this, and I'm also noticed Soul Sever comes in here. And then you can see, I got the debuff and the Soul Sever's here. So I call now, it's like, the Soul's still up, but they had Parasitic Wound. Our Rogue who deals with our Parasitic Wound. Everyone else was nuking the fuck out of the boss, so I'm going to grab it. And just try and be useful in some manner. I'm not asked about my DPS. It's a weird thing. It's kind of an old school idea. Is I'm really hoping that everybody else just gets on with their job and try and pick up the slack elsewhere. So I don't have the healing debuff. I have etc. etc. Nupsy goes and grabs my soul. What a hero. And then I'm just going to ice block off the debuff and then finish off the boss. And that's going to be Mythic Gul'dan, which is absolutely tremendous. So I hope... Oh, gotta wait for the kill. Gotta wait for the kill. And there's nerd screams and all that kind of stuff because we're just CCing. In fact, was that one not CC'd? It's just running wild. Who gives a fuck, right? The picnic is there. Now, we certainly weren't the first to kill Mythic Gul'dan or anything like that. But there's so much going on there. So many decisions to be made that I think we can all learn a lot from how we can use our class and how we can adjust things, how we make different decisions in progress. In farm, I'll be doing way more damage by simply not holding back as much and trying to kill the boss as quickly as possible because we know the fight and we can account for more mistakes as we go on. But coming into progress, it's making decisions like that. Like, I need to make sure this job's done. Otherwise, my raid might struggle. And my death isn't that big of a deal at this point. Like, am I sacrificial at this point? Is it going to help? Very difficult to know when that's the time. I don't recommend you guys start diving off bridges or anything. But this is a wonderful fight. I hope you realize why now. How it alters and changes depending on what's going on. How you can eliminate RNG. And how you can decide how to deal with it in your own way. Depending on what your raid can do. And that's one of the things I found the most fun about it. Alright? So that's my Mythic Gul'dan discussion. Bye. Bye-bye.